everybody, it's Jeff. It's been a while since I have been with you guys, so just wanted to check in with you and let you know what's going on in student ministry. So today we're going to be talking about discipleship, and if you go to our website, parkwaybaptistchurch.net, and click on the Youth and College Ministry tab, you'll actually see our mission statement, and we'll put it down at the bottom of the screen for you, but I'm going to read it to you real quick. So it says, "We desire to make disciples of students by sharing the gospel, evangelizing the lost, planning strategic events to help them engage with God's word, and to personally model Christ-likeness for those who lack parental involvement." Okay? So what I like to do in the next couple of division videos that I'm going to be sharing on the channel is walk through that kind of mission statement and talk about each one of those individually and kind of break it down, like what does it mean to make a disciple? What is a disciple? What are these things? We throw these terms out an awful lot and then we don't really talk about what they actually mean. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Is the first thing that we're going to do is kind of define what is a disciple. All right. So the dictionary definition of a disciple is one who accepts and assists in spreading the doctrines of another. So one who accepts and assists in spreading the doctrines of another. That's a good dictionary definition, but in Christianity, discipleship is something different. A disciple is someone who models their life after Jesus. In fact, you can go on desiringgod.org and just type in disciple, and one of the articles that'll come up actually walks you through the definition of a disciple. So I actually did that for you so you didn't have to. So applied to Jesus, a disciple is someone who learns from him to live like him. All right? Someone who learns from Jesus how to live like Jesus. Well, how do we learn from Jesus? It's not like he's, walking around today. Well, God's word is how we learn from Jesus, all right? Jesus is the revelation of God, of himself to his people, and God does that through his word, through the Bible. So studying the Bible is how we learn how we should live, all right? And that is one of the foundations of discipleship. Now, there are three kind of aspects of discipleship that we're going to look at. And the first one that we're going to do today, that we're going to spend most of our time on, is disciples are worshipers. In John chapter 4, Jesus is talking to the woman at the well, and he says that God is searching for true worshipers. True worshipers will worship God in spirit and in truth. Jesus also says in John chapter 14, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." So Jesus is telling people that the only way to worship God is, number one, to worship God through Jesus. Okay, so Jesus is our mediator in between us and God. You can look at Hebrews chapter 4, where it talks about Jesus is actually constantly mediating between us and God. Jesus is the way that we communicate with God. It's only through Jesus that we are able to communicate with God. And it's only through Jesus that we're able to rightly worship God. Worship happens when we recognize the glory of God, right? 1 Corinthians 10:31 says, "Whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God." So everything that we do in our lives should be bent toward glorifying God, making much of his name, and worshiping him. Okay, so what does worship look like for a disciple? Well, number one, God says that to be a worshiper, you can only worship me. All right, in Exodus chapter 20, God lays out the Ten Commandments to Moses, and he says, I am the Lord your God, you will have no other gods before me. So God is jealous for his glory. Anything that takes away from the glory of God, anything that we give glory to other than God is an idol. And it's a little g God. It's something that shouldn't be worshiped. But when we elevate things that may be good things to God things, then we are actually worshiping something other than God, and we've become idolaters. Now, nobody thinks, or when people think of idolatry, sometimes we think of like, I don't know, some sort of carved image or a statue that people, in some country bow down and worship. The idolatry is on display in places like India where they actually have shrines set up to different images and idols and false gods. It's really easy to recognize that, but in our culture, in our society, our gods are a little bit more under the radar and a little bit more socially acceptable too, because they're so commonplace. Our gods are television. Our gods are entertainment. Our gods are sports and sports figures and movies and these types of things. Parents, some of you, your God is your children. And kids are awesome. Don't get me wrong. I have a 2-year-old. He's the best kid in the world. I love him to death. He's an awesome kid, but he would be a lousy God. Okay? So we need to make sure that when we're pointing our fingers and identifying the idols in other people's lives, that we first turn the gospel onto ourselves, the spotlight of the gospel onto ourselves, and examine our own lives against what the gospel says. Now, am I saying that you can't watch football or TV or do any of those things? No, absolutely not. But what I am saying is that if you spend all your time, or if you spend way too much time focusing on those things to the exclusion of getting to know Christ through Bible study, prayer, fasting, and sowing your treasure into a ministry, then you are missing out. You have an idol in your life, and maybe you haven't recognized it before. So for our first video, for this segment, it's really important to remember that a true disciple of Jesus is going to worship Jesus as God, is going to worship God through Christ, our mediator, like it says in Hebrews chapter 4, and is going to have no other gods other than the God of the Bible. So this has been Jeff. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys and talking to you guys next time as we continue to walk through what it means to be a disciple.